Valerie Thompson never believed in omens. At 35, she had a degree in economics, a 14-year-old son named Chris, and a management position at a large retail chain. She was used to relying on facts, figures, and logic. That was why, as she walked out of the grocery store that afternoon with 2 bags full of items for dinner, the last thing she expected was an encounter with the inexplicable. The September air was warm and pleasant. The sun was already leaning toward the horizon, dyeing the sky an amber hue. Valerie was in a hurry. Chris would be back from practice in half an hour, and she needed to make something substantial. At 14, the boy ate like 3 people, especially after soccer. She paid at the register, put the card back in her wallet, and headed for the exit. The bags were heavy in her hands: potatoes, ground beef for burgers, salad greens. At the automatic doors, Valerie tried to get a better grip on the groceries and heard the characteristic jingle of metal on the tile floor. Turning around, she saw her key ring on the ground. It had evidently fallen out of her jacket pocket as she adjusted the bags. "Hold on!" A woman's voice resonated, low and husky. A woman in a brightly colored floral skirt and a worn leather jacket was already bending down for the keys. She had a bohemian look. Valerie tensed up involuntarily. There were many like her in the city, and encounters usually ended with persistent requests for a palm reading or panhandling. The woman picked up the keys and walked toward Valerie. She was probably in her early 30s, with a tan face, strong features, dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and black, lively, observant eyes. Several gold chains hung around her neck, and her hands were adorned with multiple rings. "Here, you dropped these," she said, holding out the key ring. Valerie was already bracing herself for the typical, "Let me read your fortune, honey." But the woman suddenly froze, staring at the keys in her palm. Her face changed as if she had seen something shocking. Her fingers closed around the metal, her brows furrowed, her lips tightened. "Listen to me very carefully." Her voice became low, serious. "Don't go home tonight, and tomorrow morning you must go by your husband's office. It's important." Valerie was baffled, then she smiled. "Right, of course. The classic trick: scare, intrigue, and then demand money to remove a curse, or whatever else they invent. Thanks for the keys." She took the key ring from the woman's warm palm. "But I'm not interested in a fortune-telling. I'm not telling your fortune." The woman looked at her strangely. There was something akin to pity in her gaze. "Just believe me," she said. "I know about these things. Believe me." Valerie shook her head, pulling a $10 bill from her wallet. After all, the woman had picked up her keys, and that deserved a thank you. And while this whole performance with a mysterious face and mystical warnings seemed unconvincing, refusing to give a small reward would be cruel. "Here, have a nice evening." The woman took the money mechanically, never taking her eyes off Valerie's face. Disappointment flickered in her eyes. She had clearly expected more. "You don't believe me, but remember, tomorrow morning, go to your husband's office. You'll see for yourself, and then you'll remember my words." Valerie nodded, not wanting to continue the strange conversation, and walked to her car. As she got behind the wheel, she glanced in the mirror. The woman was standing by the entrance of the grocery store, watching her with a sad expression. Then she turned and walked away slowly, tucking the bill into the folds of her skirt. A one-woman show, Valerie thought, starting the engine. A well-rehearsed performance. On the way home, she hummed along with the radio and mentally went over her plan for the evening. Burgers, salad, check Chris's homework, though at his age he should be responsible for his own schoolwork. Greg had promised to be home by 8. He had a meeting with some new contractor. Her husband ran a logistics business with a partner. Business was good. They had enough money for all the necessities and even more. She and Greg had been married for 17 years. They met as students, married young when Valerie was just a girl. Greg was 3 years older, self-assured, ambitious. Back then, he was just starting to build his business, and she worked as a bookkeeper at a small firm. Chris was born a year after the wedding, and Valerie took maternity leave, dedicating herself completely to motherhood. Then she gradually returned to work, changing jobs several times until she landed the manager position at the retail chain. In recent years, their relationship had settled into a kind of quiet routine. There were no fiery passions like in their youth, but there was habit, mutual respect, a shared daily life, and their son. Valerie believed this was what an adult marriage should look like. No fairy tale romance, but reliability and stability. They didn't fight, they didn't argue, they handled matters practically. Maybe it wasn't the burning love from novels, but it was dependable. Arriving home, she parked and grabbed the bags. Their apartment was on the 5th floor of an ordinary 9-story building, not a luxury condo, but spacious and comfortable, a 2-bedroom with a nice renovation they'd done 3 years ago. Chris had his own room where he could retreat and do as he pleased within reason, of course. In the building's entryway, Valerie suddenly stopped. The woman's phrase echoed in her head, "Don't go home tonight." She shook her head, pushing away the absurd thought. What nonsense was this? This was her home, her family. Where else would she go? And more importantly, why listen to the ravings of a street psychic? Valerie had prided herself her whole life on her rationality, her ability to not be swayed by emotions and superstitions, and she wasn't about to change her principles now. But something made her slow her pace in the lobby. A vague, inexplicable, and irritating anxiety, as if something inside her was coiling, warning of danger. "Stop it," Valerie chided herself. "You're a grown woman acting like a superstitious fool. That woman is just a good manipulator. She probably tells everyone the same thing." She rode the elevator up, took out her keys, the very ones the woman had picked up, and opened the door. The metal felt cool against her fingers, and Valerie involuntarily remembered how the woman's face had changed when she touched the key ring. The apartment was silent. Chris wasn't home yet, and neither was Greg. Valerie stepped into the entryway, turned on the light, and froze. On the coat rack where her and her husband's jackets usually hung, there was a beautiful, obviously expensive silk scarf with an elegant print in shades of turquoise and gold. The scarf was a woman's, there was no doubt about it. Light, airy fabric, delicate hem, a chic design, and it definitely did not belong to Valerie. She slowly set the grocery bags on the floor. Her heart began to beat faster, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. She walked closer, examining it. The silk was smooth, high quality. It still held the faint scent of an unknown perfume, something sweet, floral, clearly not her Chanel. A youthful, light, yet insistent aroma. Valerie took out her phone and took several pictures. The scarf in close-up, the scarf against the backdrop of the entryway, the time on the lock screen, 7:23 p.m. She even knelt to capture part of her apartment door in the frame. Evidence. Clear, irrefutable evidence. Her fingers were surprisingly steady. No trembling, no hysteria, just a cold clarity in her head and a sharp understanding. Something was happening, something she didn't know about, and that something had left a trace right in her entryway. She could grab that scarf now, throw it in her husband's face when he got home, make a scene, demand an explanation. Valerie could perfectly imagine what that would look like. Shouting, tears, accusations. And Greg. Greg would start making excuses, invent a story, say it was a gift for her or his sister or his mother. He would find an explanation, cover his tracks, destroy all the evidence while she was arguing, and she needed the truth, the whole truth, without lies or half-truths. She put the phone in her pocket, picked up the bags, and went to the kitchen. She acted on autopilot, unpacked the groceries, put them away, put the kettle on to boil. She sat at the table and stared out the window. It was getting dark outside, lights were coming on in the neighboring buildings, so this was it. 20 minutes later, Chris returned, flushed, disheveled, and happy. He burst into the apartment like a small hurricane. He kicked off his sneakers in the entryway without even glancing at the fateful scarf. A 14-year-old boy rarely pays attention to details of the interior or his parents' clothes. "Hey, Mom, I'm starving. We practiced for 2 hours today. I scored 3 goals. Coach said if I keep this up, he'll put me on the starting lineup for the regionals." Valerie smiled, hugging her son. He was sweaty, hot, but so happy. Her boy, her joy. She was ready to go through anything for him. "That's great. I'm so proud of you. Go take a shower, then change, and we'll have dinner. Dad will be home soon. What's up with you?" Chris looked at her with his bright eyes, so much like hers. "You look tired." "Just a headache." "It's nothing serious. It'll pass." The boy nodded and ran off to the bathroom. Valerie started frying burgers, chopping vegetables, setting the table, all mechanically, on autopilot, while thoughts churned in her head. A scarf, a strange woman's scarf in her entryway. How did it get there? Did Greg come home during the day, or last night while she was at work and Chris was at a friend's house? Greg returned exactly at 8, as he had promised. He came in, kissed Valerie on the cheek, a usual, habitual gesture repeated day after day. "Hey, how was your day?" "Normal. Dinner's ready." "How was the meeting?" "Productive. We agreed on a new route. We'll be shipping construction materials to the next state over." "Good money," he said easily, without any tension. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, hung it in the entryway right next to that scarf. He didn't even look in that direction. Such obliviousness. The three of them sat down at the table. Chris chattered about soccer practice, about how his team was preparing for the regional competitions, about the new goalie who had transferred from another school. Greg listened, nodded, asked questions, joked. Everything was as usual. A normal family, a normal evening, normal conversations. Valerie ate in silence, occasionally inserting brief replies. She watched her husband, 38 years old. Athletic build, which he maintained with gym sessions 3 times a week. Dark hair with the first gray at the temples. A confident smile, a steady voice. Nothing unusual. No signs of guilt or nervousness. No new cologne on his clothes. No strange calls. No rushing. After dinner, Chris went to his room to do his homework. Greg settled in the living room with his laptop, looking over some documents, writing emails. Valerie cleared the table, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the counter, washed her hands. "Greg, I'm going to sleep in the living room tonight," she said calmly, passing by the sofa. He looked up from the screen, a flicker of surprise on his face, but nothing more. "Did something happen? My head is killing me. I don't want to wake you up in the night if I get up for pills, and I'll just be tossing and turning. I know myself. Maybe you should take something now. There are painkillers and muscle relaxants in the medicine cabinet. I already did. I just need to lie down quietly. It should pass. I need some peace. Okay. Feel better. If you need anything, wake me up. I'll get you water, or whatever you need." He went back to his laptop. Valerie went into the living room, closed the door, and lay down on the sofa without changing, just taking off her slippers. She pulled out her phone, looked at the photos of the scarf, zoomed in on the image, examined the pattern. An expensive item, clearly not from a mass-market store. Tomorrow morning, she would go to Greg's office. She would see what was going on. The woman had said, "Go by your husband's office." And as crazy as it sounded, Valerie felt she had to check. She had to see it with her own eyes. She couldn't sleep until late into the night. She lay in the dark, listening to the silence of the apartment, trying to understand when it had all gone wrong. Were there signs she had missed late nights at work? Coldness? Strange calls? Sudden mood swings? Nothing. Or she just hadn't paid attention, immersed in her routine. Work, son, home, work again. Maybe she had stopped looking at her husband as a man, turning him into a part of the everyday habit, like furniture or wallpaper. Before dawn, Valerie finally drifted into a restless sleep, filled with confusing images and anxious dreams. And when she woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of her alarm, her decision had fully formed. Today, she would learn the truth, by any means necessary, even if that truth destroyed everything she had considered reliable and stable. Her head felt heavy after the sleepless night, but her thoughts were surprisingly clear. She washed up, put on black jeans and a brown sweater. She wanted to be inconspicuous. She drank tea, ate a sandwich with turkey and cheese. She put on a little makeup so she wouldn't look exhausted. The mirror reflected the calm face of a woman who knew exactly what to do. The apartment was still quiet. Valerie wrote her husband a short text message. "Went in early. Inventory. Wake Chris up and make sure he gets to school. I'll be back in the evening." She sent it, grabbed her purse, keys, put on her jacket, and quietly left the apartment. The September morning greeted her with coolness. The city was just waking up, few pedestrians, buses with sleepy passengers, street sweepers clearing leaves from the sidewalks. Valerie got in her car and drove across town to the business center where the office of Greg's and his partner Nicholas Fisher's logistics company was located. On the way, she stopped at a coffee machine and got a large cappuccino. Her hands trembled slightly as she brought the cup to her lips. Nerves. But she would get through it. She had to. At 8 a.m., she arrived at her own job and asked her boss for a personal day due to family circumstances. She filled out the request, left the building, and headed to her husband's office. The office was in a 4-story building on the edge of the business district. Valerie knew this place. She had been here a couple of times to see her husband when she needed to pick up documents or bring forgotten papers. There was a fairly large parking lot nearby. That's exactly where she settled, taking a spot in advance with a good view of the entrance. It was 8:30 a.m. Greg usually got to work at 9, sometimes a little earlier. Valerie finished her coffee and watched the flow of cars. Her heart beat steadily, but fast. She turned on the radio at a low volume for background noise so she wouldn't go crazy in the silence. The cars gradually filled the parking lot. Vehicles had already parked on either side of her. The owners got out and went about their business. The wait was not long. At 8:45 a.m., a familiar gray Toyota Camry, Greg's car, pulled into the parking lot. Valerie tensed, watching intently. Her husband didn't notice her among the sea of cars. He parked in his usual spot, not far from the entrance. He turned off the engine, but didn't get out. Valerie frowned. A minute passed. Another. Greg was sitting behind the wheel, leaning toward the passenger seat. Valerie took out her phone, activated the camera, and zoomed in. What she saw hit her harder than a slap. There were 2 people in the car, Greg and a young woman, clearly much younger than Valerie herself. Long dark hair, a delicate face. They were sitting close, very close, and they were kissing. Not a polite peck on the cheek. A real, long, passionate kiss between 2 people who didn't care if they were seen. Valerie pressed record. Her fingers no longer trembled. They had turned to stone. She recorded everything. How Greg embraced the girl by the shoulders, how she ran her hand through his hair, how they laughed, their foreheads touching. The camera clearly captured the car's license plate, the time on the screen, the surrounding parking lot. Then the girl straightened up, fixed her hair, said something. Greg nodded, ran his hand along her cheek tenderly, almost reverently. They kissed one more time, quickly, and the girl got out of the car. Valerie kept recording. The girl was dressed stylishly. A short skirt, a fitted sweater, a beige cashmere coat, high boots. A slim figure, a confident walk, a youthful, almost girlish face with a fresh blush. 20 years old, maybe 22 at most. Greg got out too, locked the car. They stood next to each other for a few more seconds, and Valerie managed to take a dozen clear photos from different angles. Then, the girl waved and headed for the parking lot exit, where a taxi was already waiting for her. Valerie recorded the car's number, the make, and even managed to distinguish the driver's profile. Greg followed the girl with his eyes, smiling. Then he took out his phone, typed something clearly a message, and walked toward the office entrance with a normal gait, a calm face, as if nothing had happened. Valerie lowered her phone. A coldness filled her entire body. She had seen the infidelity with her own eyes, but for some reason, she didn't feel pain. Not yet. There was something else. Fury. A cold, rational fury of a person who has been betrayed. She started the car and carefully followed the taxi, keeping her distance. The driver took the girl to the city center, to one of the modern residential complexes. Valerie memorized the address, took photos of the building. The girl got out, paid, and disappeared into the entrance. Now she needed to find out who she was. Valerie returned home only around noon. Greg had sent her a couple of messages. Chris got off to school on time. How's inventory going? She replied briefly. It's dragging on. I'll be back in the evening. She sat down at the computer, opened the photos she had taken that morning, zoomed in on the girl's face. Young, beautiful, with regular features. Who was she? A colleague? A client? A casual lover? Valerie opened social media and began the search. First, she went to Greg's page. It was sparse, mostly business posts and company news reposts. He had about 200 friends listed, but most were colleagues and partners. She methodically went through the list, carefully looking at the avatars, and suddenly she found the familiar face. The girl from the parking lot. Angela Fisher. Valerie clicked on the profile. The page was public. The girl clearly didn't bother with privacy settings. About me. 20 years old. Junior in the business school, enjoys photography and travel. The latest posts. Selfies from cafes, photos with friends, quotes about love, and most importantly, under the family section, Nicholas Fisher was listed. Father. Valerie sighed heavily. The partner's daughter. Greg was dating his business partner's daughter, a 20-year-old kid who could be his own daughter. This was a catastrophe. Not just infidelity. This destroyed the business, the partnership, all ties. Valerie continued to study Angela's page. The girl posted photos frequently, but Greg was nowhere to be seen. Not a hint of the relationship. Everything was hidden, clandestine. However, comments from friends appeared. "When are you going to introduce us? He's so great." "You two make such a beautiful couple," Angela replied with emojis and vague phrases. Valerie opened Nicholas Fisher's page. A 45-year-old man, divorced. In photos, he looked distinguished, graying, with a strong-willed face. Posts about business. Rare family photos with his daughter. The last joint photo was from August. Nicholas with Angela at a restaurant. The caption, "With my beloved daughter, my reason for everything." So the father didn't know about the romance. Otherwise, Greg would have already lost both his business and his teeth. Valerie closed the laptop and paced around the apartment. Her thoughts were coming together into a clear picture. Greg was seeing Angela in secret. The girl was young, in love, probably believed his every word. And him. He was married, had a teenage son, a family. What did he tell her? That he was getting a divorce? That his wife didn't understand him? A classic of the genre. And the scarf. That silk scarf in the entryway must have belonged to Angela. She had been in their apartment, when no one was home. Valerie felt anger welling up inside her, spreading through her veins like a hot wave. He had brought his mistress into their home, into the house where their son lived, where their memories were kept, shared meals, photographs, belongings. She needed to act. But how? Making a scene was pointless. Greg would deny it, lie, accuse her of being suspicious, and the evidence could be explained away. I was just giving the partner's daughter a ride. She asked for it. Going to Angela was also foolish. The young girl was in love. She would defend Greg, believe his version. That left one option. The hardest and the most correct one. Valerie took out her phone and found Nicholas Fisher's contact. She had his number. They had exchanged information once at a corporate event, and Nicholas had said, "If anything urgent comes up, you can always call me." She wrote a message. "Nicholas, good afternoon. This is Valerie, Greg's wife. I need to meet with you in person about an important matter concerning Greg and your family. It's urgent. When could you spare half an hour?" She pressed send and waited, holding her breath. The reply came 5 minutes later. "Valerie, hello. Has something serious happened? I can meet today at 6 p.m. at the Central Cafe. Do you know it? Or would you suggest another place?" Valerie quickly typed back, "The cafe is fine. I'll be there at 6. Thank you." Now she needed to prepare. She transferred all the photos and videos from her phone to her laptop, made backup copies on a flash drive and in the cloud. She printed out the clearest snapshots. Greg with Angela in the car, their kiss, the girl getting out of the car. She put everything in a folder. Then she took out the photos of the scarf she had taken yesterday. She printed those too, took the scarf itself, and put it in her purse. At 6 p.m., Valerie was ready. She had changed into a business suit. She wanted to look serious, professional. She pulled her hair back in a ponytail, wore minimal jewelry, took the folder with the documents, and drove to the meeting. The cafe was small, cozy, with dim lighting and soft music, the perfect place for a confidential conversation. Valerie arrived 10 minutes early, ordered an espresso, and sat at a table in the corner. Nicholas appeared exactly at 6. A tall, well-built man in an expensive suit. The gray at his temples gave him an air of solidity, A calm face, but a sharp gaze. The gaze of a person used to noticing details. "Valerie," he shook her hand. "Sorry to keep you waiting. The traffic. You're on time. I just got here. Thank you for making time." Nicholas sat across from her, ordered an Americano. When the waiter left, he looked at Valerie expectantly. "I'm listening. Your message worried me. Did something happen to Greg?" Valerie silently opened the folder and placed a photograph on the table. Greg and Angela in the car. The kiss. Nicholas froze. He picked up the photo, brought it closer to his eyes. His face didn't change, but Valerie noticed how his jaw muscles tensed, how his eyes narrowed. "Where was this?" "This morning, your office parking lot, 8:45 a.m. She laid out the other photographs, Angela getting out of the car, Greg watching her go, the girl getting into a taxi. "I have a video," Valerie added quietly. "If you want, I can show it to you." Nicholas was silent. He looked at the photos, and Valerie could see the fury burning in his eyes. Controlled, contained, but no less terrifying for it. "How long has this been going on?" he finally asked. "I don't know for sure. Yesterday, I found this in our entryway." She placed the scarf on the table, a woman's scarf, not mine. "This morning, I decided to check. I went to the office and saw." Nicholas nodded, putting the scarf in his pocket. "This is my daughter's scarf. I bought it for her myself." Nicholas frowned. "Does my daughter know that Greg is married?" "I'm not sure, but I suspect he fed her a story about an impending divorce. Are you and Greg having problems in your family?" "No," Valerie shook her head. "Or rather, I thought so until yesterday. We live a normal life. We have a son, 14 years old. Greg comes home, has dinner with us, asks about our son's day, sleeps with me. He behaves like a loving husband and father. No signs that he's planning to get a divorce." Nicholas ran a hand over his face. He exhaled. "Valerie, I didn't know. If I had known, I would have stopped this long ago. I understand. That's why I came to you, not to your daughter. Angela is in love. She'll defend Greg. She'll believe him. And he's a master of lies. I understand that now. What do you want from me?" Valerie looked him straight in the eye. "I want you to talk to your daughter, show her the truth, protect her from his manipulations. She's young. She has her whole life ahead of her. She doesn't need to waste time on a married liar. And you? I will file for divorce. But I need evidence for the court, for the division of assets, and I need Angela to stop seeing Greg. Otherwise, he'll keep lying to both of us." Nicholas nodded slowly. "I'll talk to my daughter tonight, and I'll show her these photographs. Is there anything else?" Valerie took out her phone. "I have a video of our family dinner. A week ago at a cafe. Greg makes a toast. He says how happy he is, how much he loves me and our son, how grateful he is to fate for such a family. You can show it to your daughter. Let her see that there's no divorce planned." Nicholas took the phone, watched the video. His face grew darker and darker. "The bastard," he said quietly. "He used my daughter. He deceived both of you. He put our business at risk. The business, if he had found out about this later, when they were all ready, he cut himself off. He might have thought Greg deliberately seduced Angela for his own purposes. The trust would have been destroyed forever." Valerie nodded. She hadn't thought about that aspect, but Nicholas was right. An affair with the partner's daughter wasn't just infidelity. It was a blow to their business relationship, to their reputation, to everything they had built together with Greg. "What will you do?" she asked. "I'll talk to Angela. I'll show her the facts. And then," he fell silent, looking out the window, "then I will reconsider my partnership with Greg. I can't work with a person I no longer trust." Valerie finished her cold espresso. She felt empty, but at the same time, strong. She had taken the first step. Now she had to keep going. "Nicholas, thank you for listening to me and for believing me. Facts are stubborn things." He stood up, extended his hand. "Stay strong, Valerie. If you need help, come to me. You did the right thing by coming to see me." They left the cafe together. It had already gotten dark outside. The streetlights were on. Valerie got in her car and just sat there for a while, staring into the darkness. Everything had changed. In 24 hours, her life had been turned upside down. And this was just the beginning. Valerie returned home late that evening. Greg was sitting in the living room in front of the TV. Chris was in his room doing homework. Everything was as usual. The familiar picture of family life, which now concealed a lie. "How was inventory?" Greg asked, without looking away from the screen. "Exhausting. We'll continue tomorrow," Valerie lied easily. It turned out that lying wasn't hard. You just need practice. She took a shower, got into bed next to her husband, and closed her eyes. He wished her good night, kissed her on the shoulder, and turned away. 10 minutes later, he was asleep. Valerie lay in the dark, listening to his even breathing, and thought about how well he knew how to pretend. In the morning, she was awakened by the vibration of her phone. A message from Nicholas. "I spoke with my daughter last night. She's in shock. She has blocked all contact with Greg. Thank you for the warning. I need to meet with you again. Can you meet today at noon?" Valerie replied, "I can do 1 p.m. Same cafe." "Okay." Greg left for work. Chris left for school. Valerie was left alone in the empty apartment. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. At 1 p.m., Valerie was sitting in the cafe again. Nicholas arrived on time, but he looked tired. His face was tense. "How did the conversation go?" Valerie asked. Nicholas sighed heavily. He ordered coffee. Difficult. At first, Angela didn't believe it. She shouted that I was lying, that I had faked the photographs. Then I gave her back the scarf and showed her the video of your family dinner, where Greg makes the toast. And then, she cried, she confessed that he had promised her a divorce. He told her he had filed the papers 2 months ago, that you two hadn't been living as husband and wife for a long time, that you were only staying together for your son, that after the divorce, he would take her with him. Valerie clutched her cup. A classic scheme, painfully cliché. "He lied to her from the very beginning," Nicholas continued. "They've been dating for 4 months. They met at a business dinner where I brought Angela with me. Greg started pursuing her, giving her flowers, taking her to restaurants. She fell in love. He was attentive, caring. He said the right words. That he was in the process of a divorce and then started seeing her behind your back. Exactly. Angela thought it was temporary, while the divorce was pending, that they would soon go public with me officially. Greg convinced her not to tell me anything, like, your father won't understand until I'm officially divorced." Valerie shook her head. How skillfully he had orchestrated everything. Deceived a young girl, deceived his wife, manipulated his partner. How is Angela now? Locked in her room, crying. She's blocked Greg everywhere on her phone, social media, messaging apps. He's already tried to call her. Wrote from different numbers. She's not responding. Does he know that you know? Not yet, but he will soon. Nicholas looked at Valerie seriously. "I've made a decision. I'm dissolving the partnership with Greg." Valerie froze. "Dissolving it? I can't work with a person who used my daughter, who put me, our business, everything we've built over 10 years at risk. How will you do it?" "I'll propose to divide the company. We have equal shares, 50% each. We'll divide the assets, client base, trucks, warehouses. Each will take their half and run the business independently." Valerie nodded slowly. It was logical and fair. "When will you tell him?" "This week. First, I'll prepare the documents, consult with a lawyer, then I'll present him with the facts." A silence fell. The waiter brought the coffee, and Nicholas drank the hot liquid from the cup. "Valerie, have you decided what you'll do?" "I'm filing for divorce. I'm going to a lawyer today. I will demand division of assets and that Chris's primary residence be with me. Do you need help with a lawyer? I can recommend a good specialist." "Thank you. That would be helpful." Nicholas nodded. He took out a business card. "This is my lawyer. If you need anything, go to her. She's an excellent specialist in family law." Valerie took the card. "Elena Sanchez, attorney at law. Thank you. I might use her." They talked a bit more about the details and parted ways. Valerie got in her car and dialed the lawyer's number. She scheduled a meeting for tomorrow. In the evening, Greg came home nervous. He went straight to the bedroom, closed the door. He was talking on the phone. Valerie could hear him dictating voice messages. "Why aren't you answering? What happened? Call me, please." At dinner, he was distracted. He barely ate. Chris was telling him something about school, but his father clearly wasn't listening. "Are you okay?" Valerie asked innocently. "Yeah, just tired. Problems with a contract." A lie. He was worried because Angela was ignoring him. The next day, Valerie spent the day with the lawyer, Elena Sanchez. The woman turned out to be professional, organized, with a sharp mind. She listened to the whole story, looked at the photographs and the video. "The evidence base is good," she said. "This is enough for a divorce. Now, about the assets. What was acquired during the marriage?" Valerie listed an apartment, a lake house, 2 cars, bank deposits. "All of this is joint property. It's divided in half by law," Elena explained. "But we can agree amicably. If Greg is reasonable, we'll propose an option. He leaves the apartment to you and your son. You don't claim the lake house and his share of the business beyond what you're entitled to. Or we'll divide everything through the court. And your son. Your son is 14. By law, his opinion is taken into account. Who does he want to live with? With me. We've always been closer. Then there won't be any problems. Get ready to file the petition for dissolution of marriage. I'll draft the complaint." Valerie nodded. It was all becoming real, terribly real. On Wednesday evening, Greg came home pale. He dropped his briefcase in the entryway, went to the kitchen, poured himself a whiskey. He drank it in one gulp. "Nicholas wants to dissolve the partnership," he said in a hollow voice. Valerie looked up. "Why?" "I don't know. He says we have different visions for the business, that it's better to separate before it's too late. I don't understand what happened. Everything was fine." Valerie was silent. She continued to chop tomatoes. "He's proposing to split everything in half. Assets, clients, trucks. I'll be left with nothing. Half a company isn't a company. It's starting from scratch. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's time for you to work separately." Greg looked at her strangely. "Are you on his side?" "I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just saying that sometimes partnerships run their course." He poured himself more whiskey. Valerie could see he was on the verge of a breakdown. Angela hadn't responded in 3 days. Nicholas was dissolving the partnership. His world was crumbling, and he didn't understand why. "You'll understand soon," Valerie thought. On Thursday morning, when Greg had left for work and Chris for school, Valerie gathered all the documents for their property. Titles, certificates of ownership, bank statements. She put everything in a folder and took it to the lawyer. "I'm ready to file," she told Elena Sanchez. "Are you sure? There's no going back." "Absolutely sure." Elena nodded and began preparing the documents. By evening, the petition for dissolution of marriage was ready. Valerie signed it and gave it to the lawyer. "Now we wait. In a few days, Greg will receive a court summons," Elena explained. "Be prepared for his reaction." Valerie was prepared. She had lived the last few days in a state of absolute clarity. There was no fear, only determination. On Friday evening, as the whole family sat down to dinner, Valerie finally said what she had been preparing all week. "Greg, we need to talk. Seriously." He looked up. His eyes showed fatigue and anxiety. "About what?" "About us. About our marriage." Chris looked at his mother, then at his father. He sensed the tension in the air. "Maybe I should go?" he asked quietly. "Go to your room, son. We'll call you when we're done." The boy nodded and quickly left the kitchen. Greg and Valerie were left alone. "I've filed for divorce," she said calmly. "You'll receive a court summons in a few days. I wanted you to know in advance." Greg turned pale. He pushed his plate away. "What? You heard me?" "Valerie, what's going on? Why? For what reason?" She took out her phone, opened a photograph. Greg, with Angela in the car. The kiss. She placed the phone on the table in front of him. Greg froze, his face contorted. Fear, shock, panic. This isn't what you think." "Don't bother," Valerie stopped him. "Don't bother lying. I have video. I have witnesses. I have proof that you cheated on me for 4 months with your partner's daughter. Nicholas knows. That's why he's dissolving the partnership. Angela knows you lied to her about the divorce, and now you know." Greg covered his face with his hands. "I can explain everything. Don't. I don't want to hear your excuses. I've filed for divorce. I want the apartment and Chris to stay with me. The lake house and your share of the business, you can take them. We can settle this amicably or through the court. Your choice." She got up from the table, took her phone, and left the kitchen, leaving Greg alone with his lie, which had finally caught up with him. Valerie went to the bedroom, lay down on the bed, and for the first time all week, she allowed herself to cry silently into the pillow so no one would hear. 17 years of marriage were over. Ahead was a new life. The next few days passed in a heavy silence. Greg tried to talk to Valerie, to explain himself, but she cut him off each time with a brief, "We'll talk through our lawyers." He slept on the couch in the living room. She slept in the bedroom. Chris sensed the tension. He became quiet, spoke less. Valerie knew she needed to talk to her son, explain the situation, but she couldn't find the words yet. On Monday, Greg received the official court summons. He read it over breakfast, turned pale, and left the apartment, slamming the door. Valerie watched him go and poured herself some tea. Chris sat across from her, poking at his oatmeal with a spoon. "Mom, are you guys getting a divorce?" he asked quietly. Valerie nodded. "Yes, son, we are." "Why?" "Because Dad acted dishonestly. He deceived us. He betrayed our trust." Chris was silent, processing the information. He was old enough to understand that his parents weren't just arguing. This was serious. This was forever. "I'll stay with you. If you want, yes. But you can see Dad whenever you want. I won't forbid it. Despite everything, he's still your father." The boy nodded, wiping away the tears that had welled up with the sleeve of his shirt. "I want to stay with you. You were always there, always helped with homework, took me to practice, talked to me. Dad was busy." Valerie hugged her son. She stroked his head, feeling him tremble. 14 years old, and he was still her little boy whom she needed to protect from pain. But the pain had already arrived. It had burst into their lives, and all she could do was help him get through it. Be there, support him, not let him shut himself away. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "Together, we'll get through this." On Wednesday, Nicholas called. His voice was tired but firm. "Valerie, I had a final talk with Greg today about dividing the business. He agreed. We're signing the documents on Friday." "How did he react?" He tried to make excuses. Said he loved Angela, wanted to be with her, but it all got out of control. That I don't understand what feelings he had. I told him I'm not interested in his excuses, that he used my daughter for his own ends and put our joint business at risk, that the trust is completely destroyed. "How is Angela?" Nicholas sighed heavily. "Bad. She doesn't leave the house, barely eats. She says she feels like a fool, that she let herself be deceived. She blames herself for believing pretty words. I'm trying to support her, but she's closed off. She cries at night. I can hear her through the wall. Maybe I should talk to her. I don't know. She blames herself. She thinks she destroyed someone else's family, that you and Greg are getting divorced because of her, that Chris is suffering. The family was destroyed by Greg, not her. He's a grown man. He's 38. He knew what he was doing. He knew he was married, that he had a son. He consciously deceived both of us. She's a victim, just like me. Just a young, naive victim who wanted love. I'll pass your words on to her. Maybe it will help. She respects you because you don't blame her directly." They said their goodbyes. Valerie hung up and thought, poor girl. 20 years old, fell for an older, charismatic man, believed his lies about a divorce and a new life together. Now she's sitting in her room, blaming herself for something she's not guilty of. Greg, he's the one to blame. Only him. On Thursday evening, as Valerie was coming home from work, Greg was waiting for her at the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, with red eyes, haggard, a person losing control of their life. "Valerie, please, give me 5 minutes. Just listen. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to explain." Valerie walked past him silently into the apartment. She sat on the sofa. Her face was calm, unreadable. "Talk. 5 minutes. I'm timing you." Greg sat across from her, his head down. His hands nervously gripped his knees. "I don't know how it happened. She was so young, interesting, full of life. I felt younger around her. She admired me, hung on my every word, laughed at my jokes. I got carried away. I didn't plan anything serious, honestly. I just wanted to feel desired again, needed, interesting, and you made up the story about the divorce. I thought. I really wanted a divorce, that things between us were over a long time ago. We were living like neighbors, Valerie. No passion, no mutual interest. You were busy with work, and Chris, I was busy with the business. We stopped being husband and wife. We became just roommates. Valerie smiled coldly. And instead of talking to me about it, discussing our problems, suggesting we change something, you went and started an affair with a kid who could be your daughter, with your partner's daughter, with a person who trusted you not just with his business, but with his family. Smart, very smart. I made a mistake. I understand that. But I love you, Valerie. I love Chris. I don't want to lose my family. Give me a chance to fix everything. You already lost it. The moment you brought your mistress into our home, when you left her scarf in our entryway, when you were kissing her in the car in the parking lot, not thinking that someone might see, when you were lying to both of us, to me and to her, 17 years of marriage, you threw it all away for a young student. Greg looked up. There were tears in his eyes, but Valerie remained unmoved. Give me a chance to fix everything. I broke up with Angela. I'll never see her again. I'll work on our relationship. I'll go to a therapist. I'll do whatever you say. Valerie, please, don't destroy our family. Valerie stood up, went to the window, looked out at the evening city. Lights in the windows, cars on the streets, the ordinary life of millions of people. Your 5 minutes are up. Go pack your things. I want you moved out by tomorrow. You can live at the lake house. You can rent an apartment. I don't care. The apartment stays with me and Chris. This is our home. You don't live here anymore. Valerie, go, Greg. I have nothing more to say to you. Everything we need to discuss, we'll discuss through our lawyers. Officially, by the law, without emotions. He sat there for another minute, then slowly got up and went to the bedroom. Valerie could hear him walking around the room, opening closets, putting things into bags. An hour later, he came out with 2 large bags and a backpack. He stopped at the door, looked at Valerie. I'm truly sorry. And I really do love you. Forgive me. She didn't answer. She just stood by the window, looking into the darkness. The door closed quietly. Valerie moved closer to the glass. She looked down. Greg was loading the bags into the trunk of his car, then got behind the wheel. He sat there for a few seconds, as if waiting for her to change her mind, run out, stop him, but she remained motionless. He started the engine and drove away. The red taillights of his car dissolved into the stream of traffic. It was over. He didn't live here anymore. 17 years of marriage had come to an end. On Friday, Nicholas signed the documents for the business division. In the evening, he called Valerie. His voice sounded relieved. It's done. We're no longer partners. Greg took his half of the assets, 3 trucks out of 6, part of the warehouses on the outskirts of the city, a list of clients. He's starting his business from scratch. I'm left with the main base, the central office, most of the major contracts. How did he look when he signed? Defeated. He understands he's lost everything. Family, partner, stability, reputation. But that was his choice, his consequences. I don't feel sorry for him. He betrayed not only me, but my daughter. He used her feelings. How is your daughter? A little better. She's come out of her room, started eating normally. She's signed up with a psychologist, goes to sessions 3 times a week. She says she wants to get through this properly, without shutting down. She's back at the university, only missed a week. Her friends are supporting her. Tell her I don't hold any grudges against her. She's not to blame for what happened. The only one to blame is Greg. Only him. I'll tell her. Thank you, Valerie. You are a strong and wise woman. Not everyone could assess everything so objectively. They said goodbye. Valerie turned off her phone and went to sleep. For the first time in a long time, peacefully, without anxiety, without fear of the next day, the divorce hearing was scheduled for early November. Greg did not contest it. He agreed to all the conditions that Valerie proposed through her lawyer, Elena Sanchez. The apartment remained with Valerie and Chris. This was recorded in the amicable settlement. The lake house went to Greg. The bank deposits were divided strictly in half. Chris stayed to live with his mother. The father was granted the right to see him on weekends and holidays if the son did not object. The process was quick, without scandals or mutual accusations. A month later, the marriage was officially dissolved. Valerie received the divorce decree and put it in a folder with documents. A strange feeling, to hold in your hands a piece of paper that draws a line under 17 years of shared life. Greg moved to the lake house. He began to build his business anew. He called Chris every evening, but his son responded reluctantly. Briefly. The relationship between them was damaged, and restoring it was very difficult. The boy felt betrayed. His father had chosen another woman over his family. That hurt deeply. Valerie gradually returned to life. Work, home, son. Meetings with friends who supported her through the difficult period, invited her to the movies, to exhibitions, or just to sit in a cafe. She learned to live alone, without a husband, without the usual stability of family life. It was scary at first, but at the same time, liberating. She became herself again, Valerie, not Greg's wife, not half of someone, just herself. In December, Nicholas called. He suggested meeting for coffee. To talk, Valerie agreed without hesitation. They sat in the same cafe where they had first met. "How are you?" Nicholas asked. "Slowly. I'm getting used to a new life, learning to be alone. It's not easy after so many years of marriage, but it's working out." "And you?" "Business is good. It's even easier to work without Greg. Fewer disputes, decisions are made faster. Angela is recovering. She sees a psychologist regularly. She's back to a full schedule at the university. She's met a young man, a senior. It seems to be going well with him. They go to the movies, walk around, talk about books and music. I'm glad for her. She deserves happiness. Real, honest happiness." Nicholas smiled warmly. "You know, I wanted to thank you for coming to me back then. At the beginning, you protected my daughter from greater pain. If it had gone on longer, if Greg had kept lying to her for months, the consequences would have been much worse. She could have completely lost faith in people. I did what I thought was right. I couldn't stay silent, knowing he was deceiving a young girl, playing with her feelings. You are a wise and dignified woman, Valerie. Greg lost a real treasure. He doesn't understand it yet, but he will. Or maybe he already has." She blushed at the unexpectedness of such words. "Thank you. It's nice to hear that. Even if he has understood something, it's too late. You can't bring back the past." They talked for another hour, about life, about plans for the future. Valerie felt comfortable with Nicholas. He was reliable, calm, honest, a person you could trust. With him, she didn't have to pretend to be strong. She could just be herself. As they were saying goodbye at the exit of the cafe, Nicholas said, "Maybe we could go out somewhere sometime, to the theater or an exhibition. Just as friends, no strings attached." Valerie smiled sincerely. "Why not, as friends?" She returned home with a light feeling in her chest. Something was changing, slowly but surely. Life didn't end with the divorce. It continued, just in a different format. And that was fine. More than that, it was right. And in the neighboring county, at the lake house in the town on the outskirts of the city, Greg sat at a large wooden table and looked at a family photo, a photo of the family he had lost. The house was cold despite the heating being on cold and empty. He was alone, completely alone. The company was small, barely surviving. Most of the employees had preferred to stay with Nicholas. He had an easier character, established connections, a good reputation. Angela didn't answer his messages. She had blocked him everywhere. Valerie divorced him and didn't even want to talk. Chris grew distant, answered his calls dryly, in monosyllables. Greg poured whiskey from the bottle standing on the table. He drank slowly, feeling the alcohol spread warmly through his body. But that warmth didn't warm his soul. He had lost everything: family, partner, stability, the respect of others. And the only one to blame was himself. His choice, his lie, his betrayal of those who trusted him. Now all that was left was to work, to rebuild his life, and to live with the consequences of his decisions. Greg finished his whiskey and went to the bedroom. Tomorrow, he had to get up again, go to the warehouse, solve problems with deliveries and clients. Life went on, an empty, cold, lonely life. He had chosen this path himself. Now he would have to walk it alone. Time passed. Fall gave way to winter, winter to spring. Valerie gradually settled into her new life. Work took up most of the day. Evenings were spent with Chris, helping with homework, watching movies, talking about his hobbies. Her son was slowly thawing after the stress of the divorce. He started smiling again, joking, inviting friends over. She communicated with Greg only when necessary, when it concerned Chris. Her ex-husband tried to restore his relationship with his son. He came on weekends, but the boy kept his distance. Forgiveness doesn't come immediately, and sometimes it doesn't come at all. Valerie met with Nicholas several times. First, they went to the theater, saw a modern play, then to a contemporary art exhibition where they argued about the meaning of abstract works. Then they just walked around the evening city, talking about everything and nothing. The communication was easy, natural, without tension or half-truths. Nicholas had been divorced for 5 years, accustomed to living alone. His daughter was his main support and joy. He talked about her a lot, how she was doing with her studies, how she had blossomed after that painful story with Greg, how happy she was in her relationship with her new boyfriend. "Angela said she wants to meet you," Nicholas said once over coffee, "to thank you personally. She understands now that you saved her from bigger problems." "I have no objection to meeting," Valerie replied. "Let her know that I never blamed her." The meeting took place a week later. The three of them sat in a small cafe near the city center. Angela looked very young, with a fresh face, no makeup, a light dress, her hair down. She was nervous. She kept her eyes down. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," the girl began quietly. "I wanted to apologize for being so blind, so naive, for not asking the right questions, for causing you pain." "You didn't cause me pain," Valerie said gently. "Greg did. He's a grown man. He knew he was acting wrongly. You were a victim of his manipulations, just like me." Angela raised her red-rimmed eyes. "But I was dating a married man. I should have realized something was wrong." He lied professionally. "You're 20. You believed in love. That's normal. Don't blame yourself," the girl cried quietly, and Valerie reached her hand across the table. Angela squeezed her fingers. "I'm with someone else now. He's honest, open. His parents know about me. I know his friends. It's so different from how it was with Greg. Real relationships aren't built on secrets." "You're thinking correctly," Valerie smiled. "Take care of yourself and your love." After this meeting, something shifted between Valerie and Nicholas. They started seeing each other more often. He invited her to dinners. She cooked for him at her place. Chris was initially wary of a new person appearing in their lives, but Nicholas didn't push. He didn't try to replace his father. He was just there. He helped the boy with a physics project, took him to a soccer game, gave him a book about the cosmos, knowing about his interest in astronomy. By early summer, a serious relationship had formed between Valerie and Nicholas. They didn't hide it, but they didn't advertise it either. They were just together, two adults who had experienced betrayal and learned to value honesty. In June, Nicholas suggested that Valerie and Chris move in with him. "I have a big house, 4 bedrooms. Angela has moved in with her boyfriend. Chris will be comfortable, a separate room, his own bathroom. We can live together as a family. No rush, no pressure, just try it." Valerie consulted with her son. "How do you feel about Nicholas?" she asked one evening. Chris shrugged. "He's okay. He's cool. He doesn't bother me with advice, but he helps when I ask. He's not trying to replace Dad. He's just there. And you're better with him, Mom. You smile more." He suggested we move in with him. "What do you think?" The boy thought for a moment. "We can try. If we don't like it, we'll come back, right?" "Of course. The apartment will still be ours in any case." In July, they moved. Nicholas's house was located in a quiet, suburban neighborhood with a garden and a terrace. Chris got a spacious room overlooking the garden and set it up to his liking. Angela came on weekends, and a warm, almost brother-sister relationship developed between the young people. Valerie felt happy, truly happy, without anxiety or fear. Nicholas was attentive, caring, honest. They discussed everything, from everyday trifles to plans for the future. No secrets, no lies. And Greg continued to struggle to survive. His business was barely staying afloat. Clients were leaving for competitors, including Nicholas, whose company was thriving. Employees were quitting, salaries were delayed, there were no prospects. Of the 6 people on staff, 3 remained. He lived alone in the lake house. He rarely went into the city. Attempts to restore his relationship with Chris were met with the boy's polite coolness. The boy answered his calls, but the conversations were short, formal. In August, Greg accidentally found out that Valerie was living with Nicholas. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it when they ran into each other. "I saw your ex with Fisher. They look so good together." Greg felt the ground give way beneath his feet. Valerie. His Valerie with Nicholas, the very same Nicholas whose daughter he had deceived. He called her for the first time in months. "Is it true? You're with Nicholas?" "Yes," Valerie replied calmly. "We're together, and it's none of your business. You did it on purpose, to get revenge on me." "Greg, you have too high an opinion of yourself. The world doesn't revolve around you. I'm with Nicholas because I'm happy with him, because he's an honest, decent person, because I trust him, that's all. And what about Chris? You dragged him into this?" "Chris is happy. He lives in a big house. He has a great room. Nicholas helps him with his studies. He has a stepsister in Angela. He's fine, and it's time you stopped thinking only about yourself." She hung up. Greg sat in the silence of the lake house, clutching the phone. The realization hit him, sharp and painful. He had lost everything. Not just his family, but the chance to be a part of their lives. Valerie no longer belonged to him. Chris had distanced himself. Even his business was collapsing, and the only one to blame was himself. In September, the thing Greg dreaded most happened. He saw them completely by chance, driving past a cafe in the city center. At a table by the window sat Valerie, Chris, and Nicholas. They were laughing, talking animatedly. Chris was showing something on his phone screen. Nicholas leaned over to look. Valerie was smiling with that open, happy smile that Greg hadn't seen in years. A family. They looked like a real family. Greg stopped the car, unable to look away. Nicholas put his arm around Valerie's shoulders, kissed her on the temple. She leaned against him, still smiling. Chris said something, and all 3 of them laughed. Greg felt a lump in his throat. This should have been him. He should have been sitting there with his wife and son. It was his place, his family, but he had destroyed it all himself. He had chosen a momentary whim over years of love. He had lied, betrayed, lost their trust. Nicholas said something to the waiter, nodded. Valerie fixed her hair, glanced out the window, and for a second their eyes met. She saw Greg in the car across from her. Her face didn't change. No surprise, no pity, just the calm look of a person for whom you are part of the past. Greg sharply turned the wheel and drove away. His heart was pounding. His eyes burned from the tears that filled them. He was no longer a part of their lives. He was erased, replaced, forgotten. Everyone got what they deserved. Valerie got an honest man who valued her. Chris got stability and a new family. Nicholas got a woman who understood the value of trust. Angela got a lesson that made her stronger and wiser. And Greg got loneliness. An empty house, a dying business, a cold bed. He had destroyed his happiness with his own hands, and now he was paying for every lie, every kiss with another woman, every promise he never intended to keep. He returned to the lake house, sat by the window. Evening was falling. Greg poured himself a whiskey, drank it in one gulp, then another, and another. But the alcohol didn't help. It didn't silence the pain, didn't bring back what was lost. All that was left was to work to get up every morning, go to the warehouse, try to keep what was left of the business afloat, to keep living with the weight of his own mistakes. He no longer had a place in their lives, and he had chosen this path himself.